Have you ever stopped to ask yourself whether the stress that consumes your mind each day is proof of intelligence or proof of disbelief? Whether the weight you carry is the burden of responsibility or the silent confession that you do not trust the invisible forces you claim to believe govern your life? Because if there truly exists an intelligence greater than your own, if there is an ordering power that shapes outcomes, laws, rhythms, and consequences, then why do you behave as though everything depends on your fear? Most people say they believe in God or fate or destiny or the unseen laws of life, but their thoughts betray them, their emotions expose them. Their constant worry is not caution, it is rebellion against order. It is the mind insisting that chaos rules, that effort without faith is safer than trust with discipline. Napoleon Hill understood this contradiction deeply. He saw that men prayed with their mouths and panicked with their minds. They asked for guidance while simultaneously strangling possibility with doubt. Stress is not caused by circumstances. Stress is caused by the refusal to decide who is in control. When Hill spoke of infinite intelligence, he was not describing a passive deity waiting to rescue the weak. He was describing a law-bound universe that responds with mechanical precision to the dominant thoughts held in the human mind. Faith was not hope. Faith was alignment, and worry was misalignment made emotional. Every anxious thought you entertain is a signal sent into the invisible network that governs cause and effect. Every fearful rehearsal of failure is an instruction issued to the subconscious mind, and the subconscious does not argue, it does not question your logic, it executes. The tragedy is not that people fail, the tragedy is that they fail while believing they are being responsible by worrying. Listen carefully to this truth, because it will dismantle many of the lies you have inherited. Stress is not preparation. Stress is sabotage disguised as concern. When you stress, you are not protecting yourself. You are programming defeat. Hill taught that the mind is both the builder and the destroyer of circumstance. The same mental faculty that can hold a burning desire with unwavering faith can also hold fear with equal intensity. The universe does not discriminate between the two. It responds to dominance, not morality. So when the voice inside whispers, God says, "Stop stressing about what I already handled," it is not comfort, it is command. It is the law reminding you that once you have set a definite purpose, once you have aligned desire with faith, your role is execution, not anxiety. Anxiety is an insult to purpose. You were not designed to micromanage outcomes. You were designed to command direction. The farmer does not pull on the crops to make them grow faster. He prepares the soil, plants the seed, and trusts the laws he cannot see to do what they have always done. Only the insecure farmer digs up the seed each day to check if it is working. Most people live as insecure farmers of their own destiny. They declare a goal, then immediately poison it with doubt. They pray for opportunity, then panic when uncertainty appears. They say they want greatness, then obsess over every obstacle as if resistance were evidence of error instead of confirmation of growth. Hill made it clear every worthwhile achievement arrives wrapped in resistance. Fear is not the enemy of success. Fear is the threshold guardian. Stress emerges when you interpret resistance as a warning instead of a requirement. The mind that understands this does not rush. It does not beg. It does not plead with life. It moves with calm authority, knowing that laws do not break under pressure. They respond to precision. Faith, as Hill described it, is not blind belief. It is disciplined expectancy. It is the ability to hold a mental image so clearly, so consistently, that the subconscious accepts it as fact and organizes behavior accordingly. Stress dissolves that image. It fractures clarity. It divides energy. A divided mind cannot command results. This is why Hill insisted on definiteness of purpose. Not vague wishing, not hopeful thinking, a single burning aim that becomes the central organizing principle of thought, emotion, and action. When purpose is definite, stress has nowhere to attach. Anxiety feeds on ambiguity. It thrives where decision is absent. Most stress is simply unmade decisions masquerading as problems. You worry about money because you have not decided what you are willing to become to earn it. You stress about relationships because you have not decided what standards you will enforce. You fear the future because you have not decided who you are committing to be. Decision is the blade that cuts through mental chaos. Hill observed that successful people make decisions quickly and change them slowly, if ever. The unsuccessful do the opposite. They hesitate, they doubt, they consult fear for permission, and then they suffer the emotional cost of indecision. Stress is the interest you pay on mental procrastination, and still people claim they are overwhelmed by life. Life is not overwhelming. Your refusal to assume command is. Infinite intelligence does not reward frantic minds. It responds to coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions move in one direction, forces align in ways that appear miraculous to those who live fragmented lives. But there is nothing mystical about it. It is law. Autosuggestion is the language of this law. What you repeatedly say to yourself with emotion becomes instruction. Most people unknowingly hypnotize themselves into anxiety. They rehearse worst-case scenarios until their nervous system believes catastrophe is imminent. Then they wonder why peace feels impossible. You cannot speak fear all day and expect faith to appear at night. Hill warned against the 6 basic fears for this very reason: poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, death. These fears do not merely exist, they coordinate. They reinforce one another. Stress is their chosen meeting place. But mastery begins the moment you realize that fear has no creative power of its own. It borrows power from your attention. Withdraw attention, and fear starves. This is why self-discipline is not optional. It is the gatekeeper of destiny. The disciplined mind does not entertain every thought. It does not negotiate with panic. It does not confuse emotion with instruction. It selects. Selection is power. The moment you choose what thoughts are allowed to remain, you step into authority. The mind that obeys you becomes an ally instead of an adversary. Stress fades not because problems disappear, but because command replaces confusion. When Hill spoke of God or infinite intelligence, he did not mean a force that removes struggle. He meant a force that responds when struggle is met with order instead of hysteria. The universe does not rescue the undisciplined. It cooperates with the precise. If you want evidence, look at your own life. Every breakthrough you've ever experienced arrived after a period of sustained focus, not frantic worry. Every moment of clarity came after decision, not desperation. Stress has never solved a single problem you face today, and yet you return to it like a ritual. Why? Because stress gives the illusion of control. It feels like doing something. Faith feels passive to the undie. Disciplined mind. Trust feels dangerous to the ego that wants credit for every outcome. But here is the brutal truth Hill would insist you confront. If you cannot trust the laws that brought you this far, you have no right to expect them to carry you further. God does not ask you to worry harder. Life does not reward panic. Infinite intelligence does not respond to emotional noise. It responds to alignment. Your task is not to manage outcomes. Your task is to manage your mind. Once desire is clear, once purpose is fixed, once action is consistent, stress becomes interference. And interference delays results. The voice that says, "Stop stressing about what I already handled," is not telling you to stop working. It is telling you to stop doubting the process you already committed to. It is telling you that obedience to mental law is more powerful than emotional reaction. Calm is not weakness. Calm is evidence of authority, and authority begins internally. You say you believe that something greater than you is at work, yet your inner world is loud with panic, racing with imagined disasters, rehearsing outcomes that have not happened and may never happen. That contradiction is not harmless. It is the fracture where power leaks away. Napoleon Hill warned that the mind cannot serve two masters. It cannot kneel before faith while secretly obeying fear. One will dominate, and whichever dominates will shape your destiny with ruthless accuracy. Stress is not neutral. It is an active force. It distorts perception, weakens judgment, and exhausts emotional energy that should be reserved for deliberate creation. When you stress, you are not simply feeling uneasy. You are training your nervous system to expect defeat. You are conditioning your subconscious to scan for threat instead of opportunity. Over time, this becomes your default state, and then you mistake it for reality. Hill understood that most people never lose because life is cruel. They lose because they never gain control over the one battlefield that determines all others, the mind. They allow thoughts to wander without supervision. They allow emotions to dictate decisions. They allow fear to masquerade as intuition, and then they wonder why nothing solid ever forms in their lives. The invisible laws do not punish you, they obey you. Every persistent emotional state becomes a command. Every repeated inner conversation becomes a blueprint. Stress, held long enough, becomes an expectation. Expectation hardens into belief. Belief shapes behavior. Behavior produces results. And when the results mirror the fear, the mind declares, "See, I was right to worry." The cycle tightens. This is why Hill placed such emphasis on autosuggestion, not as a gimmick, not as positive thinking for the weak, but as deliberate mental programming for those who understand causation. Autosuggestion is how you speak to the deeper mind that does not reason, does not debate, and does not distinguish between imagined experience and real one. It responds to feeling, repetition, and conviction. Most people unknowingly use autosuggestion against themselves. They flood their inner world with phrases like, "What if this fails? What if I'm not enough? What if it all falls apart?" They feel these thoughts intensely, emotionally, repeatedly, and then they act surprised when confidence erodes and outcomes collapse. Faith, in Hill's philosophy, was never religious sentiment alone. It was the ability to generate a mental state so stable that fear could not dislodge it. Faith was emotional certainty. Stress is emotional chaos. The two cannot coexist. To say God has already handled it does not mean you abandon effort. It means you abandon hysteria. It means you move with the calm precision of someone who understands that outcomes are shaped by laws, not moods. You plant the seed, you water it consistently, and you do not scream at the soil for not moving fast enough. Impatience is disguised distrust. The stressed mind is always in a hurry because it secretly believes time is an enemy. The disciplined mind understands time as an ally when direction is clear. Hill observed that persistence is not frantic repetition. It is sustained, intelligent effort guided by unwavering belief. Stress burns persistence from the inside out. It turns long-term effort into short bursts of panic followed by exhaustion. This is why so many people start strong and finish nowhere. They confuse intensity with consistency. They surge emotionally, then collapse mentally. They mistake adrenaline for purpose, but purpose is quiet. It does not need constant reassurance. It does not beg for signs. It moves forward even when nothing seems to be happening on the surface. The unseen work is always happening first. When Hill spoke of imagination, he was not encouraging fantasy. He was describing the workshop where all material achievement is first assembled. Imagination gives form to desire. But stress corrupts imagination. Instead of seeing possibility, the anxious mind sees threat. Instead of rehearsing success, it rehearses collapse. What you imagine repeatedly, you prepare for unconsciously. A calm mind imagines solutions. A stressed mind imagines escape. And here is a truth that most people resist because it strips them of excuses. You choose which mind you cultivate. No one injects stress into you. Circumstances may present pressure, but stress is your interpretation of that pressure. Two people can face the same obstacle. One grows sharper, the other unravels. The difference is not intelligence, it is mental discipline. Hill insisted that self-discipline is the price of admission to success. Without it, talent decays, opportunity slips away, and desire becomes a source of suffering instead of fuel. Discipline means you do not allow fear to narrate your life. You do not give stress the microphone and call it realism. Realism is understanding cause and effect. If stress weakens clarity and clarity is required for effective action, then stress is irrational. It feels justified, but it is strategically stupid. Hill would say that emotions must be brought under control not because they are evil, but because they are powerful. Uncontrolled power destroys its owner. The mind is the same. Decision is the turning point. Hill called it the most neglected principle of success. Indecision keeps the mind in limbo, and limbo breeds anxiety. When you decide, even imperfectly, mental energy consolidates. The scattered thoughts align. Stress begins to dissolve because the mind now has direction. Direction creates calm. Most people wait for certainty before they decide. Hill taught the opposite. Decision creates certainty. Faith follows commitment, not the other way around. You do not feel confident and then act. You act decisively, and confidence is generated through movement. Stress thrives in stillness without purpose. Once a decision is made, persistence becomes possible. Without decision, persistence is impossible. You cannot persist toward something undefined. So the mind oscillates, worries, second guesses, and drains itself emotionally. The body feels tired, but it is not from work. It is from mental friction. This is why the voice that says stop stressing is not telling you to stop caring. It is telling you to stop resisting your own decisions. It is telling you to trust the process you initiated when you committed to a definite purpose. Hill believed that the universe responds to definiteness with cooperation. Vague desires receive vague results. Definite aims attract definite assistance. But assistance often comes disguised as challenge. Stress blinds you to this. It makes every obstacle look like opposition instead of refinement. Pressure is not punishment. Pressure is preparation. Fear mastery is not the absence of fear. It is authority over fear. Hill never claimed that successful people do not feel fear. He observed that they do not obey it. They recognize fear as a signal, not a command. Stress, on the other hand, is fear obeyed over time. It is fear given a permanent residence in the mind. You are not meant to live there. The human system cannot sustain prolonged stress without distortion. Judgment narrows, creativity declines, energy leaks, relationships strain, and then people say success costs too much. But success is not the cost. Undisciplined thinking is. The calm mind is not passive. It is alert. It is watchful. It is responsive. It is capable of sustained effort because it is not constantly fighting itself. Hill would argue that calm is evidence of internal alignment. When desire, faith, and action agree, the mind rests even while the body works. This is the state in which invisible forces cooperate. When you are frantic, signals are mixed. When you are calm, signals are clear. The subconscious responds with coordination instead of confusion. Opportunities are noticed. Ideas surface. Intuition sharpens. None of this feels dramatic. It feels natural. Stress is loud. Alignment is quiet. Most people chase emotional highs because they mistake excitement for progress, but excitement fades. Discipline remains. Hill's philosophy was never about feeling good. It was about becoming effective. Effectiveness does not require stress. It requires clarity, consistency, and control. If God has already handled it, your job is not to interfere. Interference looks like doubt. It looks like emotional overreaction. It looks like abandoning the plan because the timeline feels uncomfortable. Trust does not mean waiting. It means working without panic. There is a difference between effort and strain. Effort is focused. Strain is scattered. Effort builds. Strain burns. Hill warned that many people exhaust themselves not because they work too hard, but because they think too chaotically. Their minds never rest, even when their bodies stop. Restlessness is not ambition. It is insecurity. And insecurity cannot lead. It can only react. The disciplined thinker understands that life responds to leadership. When you lead your own mind, circumstances eventually follow. When you allow stress to lead, circumstances dominate you. This is not mysticism. It is psychology aligned with law. You cannot command results while questioning your own authority. The phrase, God says stop stressing, is not a soft reassurance. It is a demand that you grow into the responsibility of belief. If you claim to trust higher laws, then act like someone who understands them. Align your emotions with your intentions. Align your thoughts with your decisions. Align your actions with your purpose. Alignment eliminates noise. And in the silence that follows, power returns. The moment you begin to understand that stress is not imposed but chosen, something uncomfortable happens inside you. Responsibility sharpens. Excuses lose their grip. You can no longer hide behind the idea that life is doing this to you. Hill wanted that discomfort. He believed that growth begins the instant a person realizes that their inner state is not a reaction but a command. Most people live as though their minds are open borders. Any thought can enter, any fear can stay, any emotion can take control. They call this being human. Hill called it mental negligence. He knew that no enterprise succeeds without management, and the most important enterprise any person will ever run is the one between their ears. Stress flourishes in unmanaged territory. When you say you are stressed, what you are really saying is that your imagination has been hijacked by fear. Imagination, the same faculty that can design fortunes, inventions, and movements, has been turned against its owner. Instead of constructing paths forward, it constructs scenarios of loss, humiliation, and failure. The mind rehearses these scenes with such emotional intensity that the body responds as if danger is present now. The body does not know the difference between a real threat and a vividly imagined one. Hill understood this deeply long before. Neuroscience confirmed it. He knew that persistent negative emotion weakens willpower, distorts reasoning, and gradually erodes self-belief. This is why he insisted that imagination must be harnessed, not indulged. Uncontrolled imagination is not creativity. It is self-sabotage. Faith is the counterforce. Faith does not deny reality. It defines it. It chooses which possibilities will be entertained and which will be rejected. Faith is selective perception aligned with purpose. Stress is indiscriminate perception aligned with fear. You cannot imagine success vividly while simultaneously imagining collapse vividly. One will dominate. The one fed with emotion will win. This is where most people fail silently. They say they want success, but they emotionally rehearse failure more often. They say they trust God, but they emotionally prepare for disaster. Their words speak faith. Their nervous system speaks fear. And the nervous system has more influence over behavior than language ever will. Hill would say that the subconscious listens to emotion, not intention. Autosuggestion works only when emotion is present. A calm, focused repetition of purpose gradually reprograms the deeper mind. But when stress is allowed to spike daily, it overrides that programming. It is like trying to build a structure while someone is quietly dismantling it every night. This is why Hill warned against negative influences, pessimistic people, and environments saturated with fear, not because they are evil, but because they infect the emotional field. Stress spreads, fear spreads, doubt spreads, and once spread, it feels personal, even when it is absorbed unconsciously. Guarding the mind is not paranoia, it is strategy. The disciplined thinker does not expose their goals to every opinion. They do not seek validation from anxious minds. They do not argue with those who cannot see beyond immediate obstacles. They move quietly, decisively, and persistently, knowing that results speak louder than explanations. Stress demands explanation. Power does not. Hill observed that people who complain are often attempting to relieve emotional pressure, not solve problems. Complaining feels like action, but it produces none. It reinforces the belief that circumstances are in control. It trains the mind to look outward for relief instead of inward for command. The mind that believes relief comes from outside remains dependent. Dependency breeds anxiety. When you truly accept that your mental state is your responsibility, stress loses its moral high ground. It can no longer pretend to be concern or caution. It reveals itself as fear that has not been confronted. And fear, when confronted, weakens. Fear thrives in vagueness. It dissolves under scrutiny. Hill encouraged deliberate analysis of fear, not to dwell in it, but to expose it. When fear is named, measured, and challenged, it shrinks. Stress avoids analysis because analysis threatens its authority. A vague sense of doom feels powerful. A clearly defined problem often looks manageable. This is why decision is such a potent antidote. Decision collapses possibilities into a single path. Stress feeds on endless possibilities. It needs the mind to stay open, uncertain, undecided. Once you decide, the mind stops spinning. Energy channels forward. Forward motion calms the nervous system. Even slow progress soothes anxiety more effectively than frantic planning. Hill knew that action, guided by purpose, stabilizes emotion. The act of moving toward a definite aim tells the subconscious that you are in control. Stress signals the opposite. It signals helplessness. You were not designed to feel helpless. The phrase "God says stop stressing" is often misunderstood as permission to disengage. Hill would reject that interpretation immediately. He believed that faith without action is dead, but action without faith is torture. Stress is what action feels like when faith is absent. Faith turns effort into expression. Stress turns effort into struggle. When you act from faith, you expect resistance but do not resent it. You understand that every obstacle carries instruction. Stress resents obstacles. It interprets them as proof of inadequacy. It personalizes difficulty. Faith depersonalizes it. This difference changes everything. A stressed mind asks, "Why is this happening to me?" A disciplined mind asks, "What is this shaping me into?" One collapses inward, the other expands forward. Hill taught that persistence is sustained effort powered by belief. Without belief, persistence becomes stubbornness, grinding against reality. With belief, persistence becomes adaptation, learning, and refinement. Stress blocks learning. It narrows focus to survival. Growth requires a wider lens. The calm thinker sees options the frantic thinker cannot. This is not because the calm thinker is smarter. It is because their cognitive resources are not consumed by fear. Stress hijacks attention. It reduces working memory. It fragments concentration. Hill may not have used these terms, but he observed the effect clearly. An anxious mind misses opportunity even when it stands directly in front of it. Opportunity rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives quietly, disguised as inconvenience, challenge, or delay. Stress trains you to reject these moments. Faith trains you to examine them. The difference is destiny. When Hill spoke of infinite intelligence, he meant that there is an organizing principle that responds to order. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions align, feedback improves. When they conflict, friction increases. Stress is friction internalized. Reduce internal conflict and X-day. RNAL conflict becomes manageable. Self-discipline is the mechanism for this reduction. Discipline is not punishment. It is protection. It protects your purpose from your impulses. It protects your future from your moods. It protects your faith from your fears. Without discipline, desire burns you. With discipline, desire fuels you. Most people never experience the peace Hill described because they never impose order on their inner world. They chase relief instead of control. Relief is temporary. Control is permanent. Control does not mean rigidity. It means choice. You choose what thoughts are allowed to linger. You choose which emotions deserve attention. You choose how long you will entertain fear before redirecting focus. These choices accumulate. Over time, they shape character. Character shapes destiny. Stress erodes character because it weakens choice. It makes reaction automatic. The disciplined mind pauses. In that pause, power exists. Hill emphasized the importance of this pause. The moment between stimulus and response is where self-mastery lives. Stress shortens that moment until it disappears. Faith lengthens it. Discipline protects it. If God has already handled it, then your role is to act as though that is true. Acting as though something is true is how belief becomes embodied. You do not wait to feel calm to act calm. You act calm, and calm follows. The body learns from behavior faster than from thought. When you slow your breath, regulate your posture, and move deliberately, you send signals of safety to the nervous system. Stress weakens. Clarity returns. This is not mysticism. It is physiology aligned with intention. Hill would argue that success is not built in moments of emotional intensity, but in hours of disciplined calm. The world celebrates dramatic breakthroughs, but they are built on invisible consistency. Stress wants drama. FI prefers routine. Routine does not feel heroic, it feels boring, but boredom is often peace misunderstood. Those who can tolerate peace without self-sabotage are rare. Many people unconsciously create stress because calm exposes unresolved doubts. Stress provides distraction. It gives the mind something to wrestle with so it does not have to confront deeper questions of purpose and commitment. But Hill was relentless about purpose. He believed that a person without a definite purpose will drift into anxiety because the mind needs direction. Direction gives meaning to effort. Meaning stabilizes emotion. When you know why you are enduring something, stress loses its sting. Pain without meaning feels unbearable. Pain with meaning becomes training. This is why Hill insisted that every person define their chief aim clearly and revisit it daily, not as a ritual, but as an anchor. When storms arrive, anchors matter. Stress arises when the mind feels unmoored. Faith anchors, purpose anchors, discipline anchors. Without them, you are tossed by every circumstance. The voice that says stop stressing is not asking you to deny difficulty. It is asking you to meet difficulty from a position of command rather than collapse. It is asking you to grow into the kind of thinker who understands that emotions are tools, not masters. Mastery is quiet. It does not announce itself. It reveals itself through consistency, through steadiness under pressure, through the refusal to panic when outcomes are not immediate. This steadiness is learned. It is trained. It is earned. And it begins by recognizing that stress has never been your ally. At a certain point in the life of every serious thinker, a realization dawns that cannot be ignored without consequence. It is the realization that the greatest battles are never fought in public, and the most decisive victories are never witnessed, said by anyone else. Hill understood that the outer world is a delayed reflection of inner command. By the time success appears, the war has already been won or lost in silence. Stress is loud because it is losing. It shouts for attention, it demands validation, it dramatizes uncertainty. Calm does none of these things. Calm does not need permission to exist. It is self-generated authority. And authority, once established internally, begins to reorder everything else. Most people misunderstand what it means to let go and trust. They imagine passivity. Hill spoke of something far more demanding. He spoke of disciplined surrender. Surrender not to circumstances, but to law, to the understanding that certain principles operate whether you believe in them or not, and that alignment with them requires restraint, not indulgence. Restraint of thought, restraint of emotion, restraint of impulse. This restraint is what separates the thinker from the drifter. The drifter reacts, the thinker responds. Reaction is fast but blind. Response is slower but precise. Stress accelerates reaction. Faith supports response. Hill observed that failure is rarely sudden. It is cumulative. It builds through small allowances, allowing doubt to linger, allowing fear to speak unchecked, allowing emotion to override reason. Each allowance seems insignificant. Together they dismantle momentum. Momentum is fragile in its early stages. This is why Hill insisted on protecting the mind during the formative period of any pursuit. When an idea is new, when a goal is fresh, it has not yet accumulated evidence. Stress attacks here because it senses vulnerability. It demands proof before commitment. Faith commits first and gathers proof along the way. Those who wait for certainty never begin. Stress convinces you that waiting is wise. Faith recognizes waiting as avoidance disguised as prudence. Hi. LL was unsparing in his critique of this habit. He saw entire lives wasted in preparation. People preparing to feel ready, preparing to feel confident, preparing to feel safe. And in that endless preparation, nothing is ever built. Action is the only antidote to fear, but not frantic action. Directed action. Action taken with an understanding of cause and effect. When you act consistently toward a definite aim, even in small ways, you send a message to the subconscious that movement is occurring. That message stabilizes emotion. Stress decreases because the mind no longer feels trapped. Trapped energy turns into anxiety. Free-flowing energy turns into focus. Hill understood that imagination must be fed with images of forward motion, not fantasies of instant triumph, but realistic visions of progress. Progress is calming. Stagnation is stressful. The body and mind are designed to move. When movement stops but desire remains, tension builds. This is why procrastination is so emotionally expensive. People think they delay action to avoid stress. In reality, delay creates stress. The longer a task is avoided, the larger it grows in the mind. Fear fills the gap left by inaction. Hill taught that decisive action, even when imperfect, reduces fear more effectively than perfect planning. Planning has its place, but planning without execution becomes rumination. Rumination is stress with a mask on. Faith transforms planning into preparation. Stress transforms planning into obsession. One clarifies, the other confuses. When Hill spoke of the invisible forces that shape destiny, he was not referring to chance. He was referring to the cumulative power of thoughts, emotions, and habits repeated over time. Nothing happens suddenly. Sudden events are simply the visible result of invisible processes reaching completion. Stress is an invisible process with visible consequences. NCEs, so is faith. Every day you choose which process you will feed. Hill emphasized the role of habit in shaping destiny because habits automate behavior. What you do consistently without conscious effort determines the direction of your life. Stress, when habitual, becomes a background condition. You may not even notice it anymore. You simply assume life feels heavy. But heaviness is not normal. It is learned. The disciplined thinker notices heaviness as a signal that alignment has been lost, that purpose has been neglected, that fear has been given too much room, and instead of complaining, the thinker corrects course. Correction is power. Most people seek relief instead of correction. They want stress to go away without changing the habits that produce it. Hill would call this wishful thinking. The laws do not respond to wishes, they respond to patterns. Change the pattern and the experience changes. Self-discipline is the ability to interrupt patterns, to catch the mind when it begins to spiral, to redirect attention deliberately, to replace chaotic thought with constructive focus. This is work. It is invisible work. No one applauds it, but it is the work that makes all other work effective. Hill did not romanticize this process. He acknowledged that it requires effort, repetition, and patience. The mind resists control because it has been accustomed to wandering. But wandering is not freedom, it is drift. Drift feels easy until it carries you somewhere you did not choose. Stress is often the first sign that drift has occurred. The mind senses misalignment before the intellect can articulate it. Anxiety emerges as a warning. Most people suppress it or distract themselves. Hill would urge examination. What decision has been avoided? What purpose has been diluted? What fear has been indulged? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are seeds. Clarifying. Clarity is the enemy of stress. Once clarity appears, action becomes simpler. Not easier, but simpler. Simplicity calms the mind. Complexity overwhelms it. Stress thrives in complexity. Faith seeks simplicity. A definite purpose simplifies life. When you know what you are moving toward, many distractions lose their power. Many worries reveal themselves as irrelevant. You still face challenges, but they are evaluated based on relevance to the goal, not emotional intensity. Relevance is a powerful filter. Hill taught that successful people are not those who avoid problems, but those who choose their problems consciously. Stress arises when problems are imposed rather than chosen. Choice restores agency. Agency restores calm. This is why responsibility, rather than being a burden, becomes liberating when embraced fully. When you accept that you are responsible for your mental state, you reclaim control. Control does not guarantee comfort, but it guarantees direction. Direction makes discomfort tolerable. The phrase, "God says stop stressing," is often interpreted emotionally, but its deeper meaning is structural. It is an instruction to cease internal resistance, to stop fighting outcomes that have not yet formed, to stop injecting fear into processes that require time. Time is neutral. Stress makes it feel hostile. Faith makes it feel cooperative. He'll observe that impatience is often a form of arrogance. It assumes that your timeline is superior to the natural unfolding of cause and effect. Patience, on the other hand, is humility aligned with law. It does not mean inactivity. It means steadiness. Steadiness is strength under control. The world mistakes agitation for urgency. Hill knew better. Urgency without clarity is chaos. Urgency with clarity is momentum. Stress creates the first. Faith supports the second. When you are aligned, you feel a quo. Ayat urgency. You move without panic. You act without frenzy. You adjust without self-criticism. This state is sustainable. Stress is not. Sustainable effort builds empires. Unsustainable effort burns them down. Hill's entire philosophy was aimed at teaching people how to sustain effort over long periods. He knew that greatness is not achieved in bursts, but in decades. Stress may fuel short-term action, but it destroys long-term capacity. This is why the calm mind is not just more effective, it is more durable. Durability matters. A stressed system breaks. A disciplined system adapts. Adaptation requires flexibility. Stress stiffens. Faith softens without weakening. It allows you to bend without breaking, to learn without collapsing, to persist without bitterness. Bitterness is stress turned inward. Hill warned that resentment, envy, and anger often accompany prolonged stress. These emotions corrode character. They distort perception. They sabotage relationships, and they further entrench the belief that life is hostile. A hostile worldview produces hostile outcomes. The disciplined thinker refuses this worldview, not because life is easy, but because hostility is inefficient. It wastes energy. It clouds judgment. It invites unnecessary conflict. Calm is efficient. Efficiency is not coldness. It is clarity of resource allocation. Where is your attention best spent? On panic or on preparation, on worry or on work, on imagining failure or on designing solutions? Hill would say the choice is always present. You may not control circumstances, but you always control response. Response shapes trajectory. Trajectory shapes destiny. Stress does not have to disappear overnight. It weakens as discipline strengthens. Faith grows through use. The more you act without panic, the more evidence accumulates that panic was unnecessary. Evidence builds belief, stabilizes emotion. Emotion fuels persistence. Persistence produces results. This chain is not broken by circumstances. It is broken by neglect, and neglect always begins in the mind. There comes a moment, often unnoticed, when a person either claims ownership of their inner world or silently agrees to live as its prisoner. Hill understood that this moment does not announce itself with drama. It arrives quietly, disguised as a choice to continue reacting the same way or to impose order where none has existed before. Most people miss it. The few who don't change everything, stress is familiar, control is foreign. The mind clings to what it knows, even when what it knows is painful. Anxiety becomes routine, worry becomes background noise, tension becomes identity. People begin to say, "This is just how I am," without realizing they are describing a habit, not a truth. Hill would reject that excuse immediately. He believed that character is not fixed, temperament is not destiny, and mental habits can be reshaped through deliberate effort. But deliberate effort requires commitment. Not the kind of commitment that feels good in the moment, but the kind that persists when emotion fluctuates. Hill called this persistence of effort backed by definiteness of purpose. Stress erodes this persistence by draining emotional reserves. Faith replenishes them. Faith, as Hill described it, is not a feeling that arrives spontaneously. It is cultivated. It is trained. It is built through repeated acts of trust, reinforced by disciplined behavior. Every time you choose not to panic, not to indulge catastrophic thinking, not to abandon your plan because of discomfort, faith strengthens. Faith grows muscular through resistance. This is why Hill never promised an easy path. He promised a lawful one. Lawful paths require adherence. They demand consistency. They reward alignment. Stress tempts you to break alignment when results are delayed. It whispers that something is wrong, that you must change direction, abandon effort, or escalate emotion. But escalation is rarely the answer. Hill observed that many people sabotage themselves at the edge of breakthrough because tension peaks just before resolution. Stress interprets this peak as danger. Faith interprets it as proximity. The difference determines whether a person retreats or presses forward. Retreat feels like relief. Progress feels like risk. But relief is temporary. Progress compounds. This is where courage enters, not as bravado, but as quiet endurance. Courage is the ability to remain steady when uncertainty remains unresolved. Stress demands certainty before action. Faith acts and allows certainty to emerge through experience. Experience educates belief more powerfully than thought ever could. Hill emphasized learning through doing because action grounds imagination. Without action, imagination drifts into fear. With action, imagination becomes practical. It visualizes next steps instead of worst outcomes. Next steps are manageable. Worst outcomes feel overwhelming. Stress thrives on the big picture distorted by fear. Faith narrows focus to what can be done now. This narrowing is not avoidance, it is strategy. You cannot solve an entire life at once. You solve today, then tomorrow, then the next. This is how mountains are climbed. The stressed mind looks at the peak and freezes. The disciplined mind looks at the next foothold and moves. Hill's insistence on definiteness of purpose was meant to counter this paralysis. Purpose provides direction even when the path is unclear. It answers the question, why endure this discomfort? Without that answer, stress magnifies every obstacle. With it, obstacles become tolerable. Tolerable does not mean pleasant. It means meaningful, Mia. Ning transforms stress into effort. Effort feels different in the body. It is energized rather than draining. It leaves fatigue without despair. Stress leaves fatigue with bitterness. Bitterness poisons motivation. Hill warned that prolonged emotional negativity creates antagonistic mental states that repel cooperation from others. People sense tension. They sense desperation. They sense resentment. These states subtly influence interactions, decisions, and opportunities. Stress isolates, calm attracts. Attraction in Hill's framework was not mystical magnetism alone. It was psychological alignment. People are drawn to those who appear centered, purposeful, and composed. They trust them. They invest in them. They follow them. Leadership begins internally. You cannot lead yourself while arguing with your own mind. This internal argument is what stress really is. One part of you wants to move forward. Another part wants safety. Without discipline, safety wins. But safety without growth eventually feels suffocating. Then stress returns louder than before. This cycle continues until a decision is made. Decision is not about certainty. It is about commitment. When you commit, you accept discomfort as part of the process. Stress diminishes because resistance diminishes. You are no longer fighting reality. You are cooperating with it. Cooperation feels lighter. Hill believed that life responds favorably to those who cooperate with its laws instead of resisting them emotionally. Resistance creates friction. Cooperation creates flow. Flow does not eliminate effort. It eliminates waste. Waste is energy spent worrying instead of building. The phrase, God says, stop stressing, is a call to cooperation. It is an invitation to align your mental state with the laws you claim to respect. If you believe that cause and effect govern outcomes, then trust the causes you are setting in motion. Trust does not mean blind optimism. It means disciplined consistency. Consistency compounds invisibly. Day after day of calm effort accumulates into momentum. Momentum eventually becomes confidence. Confidence quiets fear. Stress loses relevance. But this process cannot be rushed. Impatience interrupts compounding. Stress demands speed. Faith respects timing. Hill observed that timing is often the missing ingredient, not effort or intelligence. People quit too soon, change course too often, or poison progress with doubt just before results would have materialized. Patience is not waiting idly. It is working steadily without emotional interference. Emotional interference is subtle. It shows up as constant checking, comparing, doubting, seeking reassurance. These behaviors fragment attention. They slow progress. They exhaust willpower. The disciplined thinker limits these behaviors intentionally, not because curiosity is bad, but because focus is finite. Where attention goes, energy follows. Where energy follows, results form. Stress scatters attention. Faith concentrates it. Concentration is power. Hill taught that the ability to concentrate on a single aim without distraction is one of the highest forms of intelligence. Stress is the enemy of concentration. It constantly pulls attention outward, toward imagined threats, toward other people's opinions, toward hypothetical failures. The disciplined mind pulls attention back. Again and again, patiently, without drama. This repetition is not glamorous. It is training. Like physical training, it feels awkward at first. The mind resists. It wants to wander. It wants stimulation. It wants reassurance. But over time, it learns. What it learns is stability. Stability does not eliminate emotion, it regulates it. You still feel pressure, you still feel doubt occasionally, but these feelings pass through instead of taking residence. Stress cannot settle in a mind that does not provide shelter. Shelter is provided through indulgence. When you indulge worry, you invite it to stay. When you observe it and redirect focus, it leaves. This is not suppression, it is leadership. Hill believed that leadership of self precedes leadership of circumstance. Once self-command is established, circumstances begin to respond differently. Not magically, but logically. You make better decisions. You communicate more clearly. You persist longer. You adapt faster. These advantages accumulate. Accumulation's destiny's language. People often ask when stress will finally disappear. Hill would answer that the wrong question is being asked. Stress does not disappear because time passes. It weakens because discipline strengthens. It loses relevance as belief solidifies. Belief solidifies through evidence. Evidence comes from action taken without panic. This is the paradox many never resolve. They wait for belief to act calmly. Calm action is what creates belief. If you truly accept that God or infinite intelligence operates through law, then your role is to align behavior with those laws. Laws do not respond to pleading, they respond to compliance. Compliance is not submission, it is intelligence. You comply with gravity not by wishing, but by respecting it. You comply with mental law by directing thought, emotion, and action deliberately. Stress is non-compliance. Faith is alignment. Alignment produces results that feel almost effortless compared to struggle, but effortlessness is earned. It is earned through hours of discipline no one sees, through decisions made when fear whispers, through persistence maintained when emotion wavers. Hill did not promise comfort. He promised competence. Competence breeds confidence. Confidence quiets stress. This chain is available to anyone willing to accept responsibility for their inner world. Not everyone is willing. Responsibility is heavy to the undisciplined. To the disciplined, it is freeing. Freedom is not the absence of constraint. It is the presence of self-command. And self-command is the foundation of everything Hill taught. If you have followed this far without turning away, without seeking distraction, without softening what you are hearing to make it easier to digest, then you are already standing at the edge of the line that separates those who merely consume ideas from those who are changed by them. Hill knew this line well. He knew that knowledge does not transform. Decision does. Commitment does. Action sustained long after emotion fades does. This is the moment where stress either regains control or loses it permanently. Up to now, stress may have felt like something that happens to you, a reaction, a byproduct, a flaw in your circumstances. But now you see it clearly for what it is, a signal that you have not yet fully accepted responsibility for your inner world. Not responsibility in theory, responsibility in practice, responsibility when no one is watching, responsibility when fear is persuasive, responsibility when comfort tempts you to retreat. Hill would say that this is where destiny becomes personal. The phrase God says, "Stop stressing," is not meant to soothe you into inaction. It is meant to strip away your excuses. It is a declaration that the laws governing your life are already in motion, already responding, already shaping outcomes based on the dominant patterns you choose to maintain. Stress is not humility. It is resistance. It is the mind insisting on control while refusing discipline. And discipline is the price. There is no success without it, no peace without it, no faith without it. Faith is not a feeling you wait for. It is a stance you take. It is the decision to align thought, emotion, and behavior with purpose, even when the future remains unclear. Stress collapses under this stance because it cannot survive where clarity and commitment exist. But clarity must be chosen daily. Every morning you decide whether fear or purpose will set the tone. Every moment of uncertainty, you decide whether to rehearse catastrophe or reinforce conviction. Every obstacle, you decide whether it is a signal to retreat or an invitation to rise. These decisions are not dramatic. They are quiet. they are repetitive, and they are cumulative. Hill taught that character is built in these small, unseen choices. The world sees outcomes. Life sees patterns. Patterns determine results. If you continue to indulge stress, you will continue to sabotage your own efforts while believing you are being cautious. You will continue to drain energy from the very goals you claim to care about. You will continue to live beneath your capacity while telling yourself circumstances are to blame. But if you decide now, fully and without reservation, to govern your mind with the same seriousness you would govern a business, everything changes. This is not metaphorical, it is literal. You do not allow random employees to make executive decisions, yet most people allow random thoughts to dictate their emotional state. They would never tolerate chaos in their finances, but they tolerate chaos in their thinking. Hill would call this irrational. Order must begin somewhere. Let it begin here. You must decide that stress no longer qualifies as a valid response. Pressure may exist. Difficulty may remain. But stress, the emotional indulgence of fear, no longer gets a seat at the table. Not because life is easy, but because you are disciplined. Discipline is saying no to the thoughts that weaken you, even when they feel convincing. Discipline is continuing to act with precision when emotion demands drama. Discipline is holding your purpose steady when results are delayed. This is the mental posture Hill described when he spoke of mastery. Mastery is not dominance over others, it is command over self, and self-command is the rarest form of power. Once you establish it, the need for constant reassurance disappears. You no longer require signs at every step. You trust the process because you are executing it faithfully. Faith and action merge. Stress becomes irrelevant. Irrelevant does not mean absent. It means powerless. Fear may knock. Doubt may whisper. But they do not decide. You decide. This is where most people hesitate. They want guarantees before they commit. Hill would say that guarantees follow commitment, not precede it. Life responds to those who move first internally. Move now, decide now, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances improve. Now, decide that you will no longer rehearse failure. Decide that you will no longer allow anxiety to masquerade as intelligence. Decide that your mind will be governed, trained, and directed with intention. This decision will feel uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is the cost of growth. Pay it willingly. You will be tempted to return to old habits. Old habits feel safe because they are familiar. But familiar has not taken you where you want to go. Familiar has kept you stressed, restless, and doubting. Choose unfamiliar discipline over familiar anxiety. Hill believed that the moment a person fully commits to their definite purpose, unseen forces begin to reorganize around that decision. Not magically, but lawfully. Behavior changes, perception sharpens, persistence deepens, and over time results appear that once felt unreachable, but only if you do not interfere. Interference looks like second-guessing. It looks like emotional overreaction. It looks like abandoning consistency because progress feels slow. Stop interfering. Do your part every day, calmly, precisely, relentlessly. Let go of the need to control outcomes. Take full control of inputs, thoughts, emotions, actions. This is maturity, this is power, this is responsibility, and responsibility is the doorway to freedom. If you want peace, earn it through discipline. If you want success, pay for it with persistence. If you want faith, practice it under pressure. Nothing is being withheld from you. Nothing is conspiring against you. The laws are neutral, they are waiting. So now, here is the demand, not the suggestion. Commit fully to governing your mind. Eliminate stress as a strategy. Replace it with clarity, decision, and controlled effort. Act every day in alignment with your purpose, regardless of how you feel. Trust the process you are executing, not because it is comfortable, but because it is lawful. Stop negotiating with fear. Stop postponing responsibility. Stop pretending stress is necessary. Decide who you are becoming and then behave like it relentlessly. This is your moment. Claim it or drift. The choice has always been yours.